Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. This is Adam with Straight Jacket White Rabbit, and thanks for joining me for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the moon and NASA. Okay, getting into the moon, I find it a really interesting topic, you guys. There's so many different things you can look into. Objects seen on the moon, lights on the moon, structures on the moon, the composition of the moon. I mean, everything about it is just, it's really intriguing once you actually start learning the details of this thing. And no, I'm not going to go into the whole scientific explanation they just came up with, like within the last 20 years of two planets smashing into each other that created the Earth and the Moon. I don't believe that. It's not viable, and there's a few reasons why I don't believe it. One, our geography is just so vastly different. I can't possibly believe that, yes, the elements that are the moon is comprised of are on Earth. That doesn't mean the Earth and the moon were made from the same source material. Um, the, there's just there's so many different forms of different types of geological structures on Earth that we have that you don't find on the moon. Different types of stone, different types of there's so many things we don't find on the moon, and beyond that, it just doesn't really make sense to me. They scrambled to come up with this answer, you guys. They literally were typing in computer scenario after computer scenario. They went through, I think it was like thousands of computer scenarios to come up with this one that kind of works. And the reason I say kind of works is because it is only a simulation, obviously, and there was available space for error in the simulation. Now, if you look at our planet, there are groups of people, you guys, who talk about the time before the moon. There, and this is not a specific like location that these stories take place, you guys. They happen everywhere from Australia to Indochina to the Greeks to the Amazon to different indigenous Native American tribes. I mean, all around the world, there are stories about the time before the moon. And when you start reading through all these stories and you really getting into the crux of what they're about, a lot of the common themes are it was very harsh environmentally on the Earth before the moon. Now with the Greeks actually said I want to make sure I say this right, Arcadians. The Greeks say the Arcadians were the people from the time before the moon. They actually existed as a group of people before the moon was here on Earth. Or not on Earth, but orbiting Earth. Which is one of the reasons why they say they were so tough, is because the environmental and even in their mythology, monsters that came with the environmental hardships made these warriors superbly trained and superbly fit to fight. That's what they did. They fought and they fought and they fought. Now, not only, I'm not going to get into the monster side, although the monster side, you guys, a lot of these stories include that the time before the moon, there were monsters, there were giant insects, there were giants, there were all manner of crazy, crazy creatures. We'll get into that on a different video. But the environment is what I want to focus on. These stories say things about the environment that they couldn't have possibly known would scientifically be true about the Earth not having a moon. Okay, these stories are passed down for thousands of years, you guys. How could they possibly know what the results of not having a moon on the planet would actually be? And they've quoted them quite scarily close. Okay, scientists today say that without the moon, there would be giant volcanic activity, increase in volcanic activity across our entire world. Earthquakes, mega storms, you name it. The oceans would a lot of the creatures in the ocean would die because there would be no tidal forces on the ocean. The ocean would, as some of these stories say, become as flat as glass. No current, no waves, nothing. Um, how did these tribes, how did these indigenous peoples know this unless what they were told was the truth? And how did they all describe such similar instances of weather anomalies and volcanic activity and, yes, monsters. It's because it happened, you guys. The moon was brought here. And this is the words of many indigenous peoples from around the world, you guys. It was brought here. Now, they all say different ways and why it was brought here and who brought it here. And I'm not going to say whether or not I believe one over the other, because the point here is if it was brought here, it was brought here by something or someone. Okay, it didn't just, come floating through our galaxy and then, oh, look, here's Earth. I'm going to get caught. And it's, that doesn't happen. That's not the way gravitational pull works, you guys. Now, if it was brought here, that would also explain some of the weird things about the scarring on the moon. The side that faces us actually has a lot more crater damage than the side facing away from us. And I mean massive crater damage. The whole thing has crater damage, but it's a much more concentrated on the side that faces the Earth. And my thinking is well, if you were pushing an object or even towing an object through space, and there were asteroids, meteorites, chunks of ice, all kinds of stuff that floats through space that were hitting this artificial moon, then that would account for why the one side would have more impact than the other side. Because as you're traveling, the objects are hitting this side, they're not hitting the other side. So I find that kind of fascinating to think about. And in terms of the moon being brought here, I don't see a whole lot of reason for something or some other civilization to bring a moon here unless they had a use for it. And not just calming down our weather. I don't believe that they had just such good intentions for us that they wanted to calm our weather. I think that it could have been used as an outpost or still being used as kind of an observatory of our species, you guys. Think about it. The dimensions of our moon alone, you guys, are the moon is not the same size as the sun. Okay, you look up, they're the same size in the sky. This is because the sun is so much further away that it seems smaller than it is, and it seems about the size as our moon. They're not the same size. But how weird is it that with NASA and all these different astrophysicists saying, oh no, the planet and the moon were created because these two objects collided, and you're telling me that the chances of that becoming the size that it did, with the rotation that it did, with the distance from Earth that it did, to do all the different things that our moon does. Do you guys realize that if our moon was any closer, any further away, that you would not get total eclipses? Things of that nature. Same thing if the moon was a little tiny bit shorter at the equator, if it was a little thinner at the equator than it is, just a little bit smaller, we wouldn't be able to get total eclipses. A lot of weird things with the size of the moon and the placement of the moon and the fact that it doesn't rotate and it's tidally locked. Now, NASA comes in and they say in the race to get to the moon, we're going to do it first. We're going to do it better. And a lot of people don't believe we went to the moon, and that's fine. I personally do believe that we went to the moon. I also believe we were directly told to pretty much leave and don't come back. Now, with the Apollo missions, you guys, a lot of people don't realize on Apollo 11, they dropped a heavy payload back towards some seismic gear they left on the surface of the moon. And they wanted to record the data on the seismic impact of this heavy load hitting the surface of the moon. And their instrument readings did something that freaked NASA out, you guys. They were panicked. There's no other way to say it. And what happened is when this payload hit the surface of the moon rang out like a bell, you guys. It vibrated for over an hour. Okay, this is a planetary body. It's a moon, but it's literally a quarter of the size of our planet, and this thing vibrated from something we dropped for over an hour. Now, that's weird and iffy to me, okay, you guys, because a lot of principles say that would dictate that the moon would be hollow. And not only hollow, but hollow and made of a very dense material, or perhaps surrounded by a dense material. It intrigued NASA so much that on Apollo 12, they actually sent up a payload. I believe it was 4 to 5 times bigger and heavier, and they were going to drop it again to see if they could duplicate the results, because they were actually thinking, hey, we did this experiment, but maybe our equipment was faulty, or maybe they were trying to scramble and grasp at straws, you guys, to try to figure out and explain this, because they didn't want to get caught with their pants down. Now, here's the interesting thing. Apollo 12 goes and they drop the payload and it hits. The moon rang for over 3 hours. Okay, now I am not an astrophysicist or any of this stuff, but up until recently, fairly recently, they didn't have an explanation for this. Now astrophysicists are saying, well, because there's less gravity and there's no atmosphere, that these waves, these shock waves, as you will, were traveling through the planet, and they were being slowed but not stopped entirely by these solid objects, until finally they were weak enough where the solid objects would stop them and the reverberating would stop. I have a problem, because you know what? That doesn't happen on Earth in almost any shape for that duration. Yes, there are impacts on Earth that can be registered from literally the other side of the planet. I'm not saying that. But this thing vibrated for over an hour, and then over 3 hours long. That doesn't happen. That's just, I mean, if you can explain it to me in the comments and make it make sense to me, by all means try. But to me, that means that this thing is not only hollow, but it's got probably a metal outer layer underneath the surface. We'll call it geography. Now, a lot of people don't know about the missing time on the Apollo mission. When we were actually up there and we were walking around on the moon, there's 2 minutes and some odd seconds of missing airtime. And there's been rumors forever that people on ham radios and other communications devices back then, which were not all that uncommon to pick up military signals, quite frankly, back in the day. Back in the day, we picked up all kinds of stuff we weren't supposed to, if you had ham radios and things like that back then. But a lot of people say that these operators picked up some of the side chatter that NASA was getting from these astronauts. And they talk about being seen from the other side of this crater by extraterrestrials, by aliens. And they're talking about, they talking about how they sounded worried and concerned. They're like, they see us over there on the other side of the crater. They're definitely watching us. And here's some interesting facts you guys may not know. Number one, we didn't hit the original landing site where we were going to land on the moon. And they say it was an accident. I believe what happened is we changed the landing site because they found things on or around the landing site that were not ours. And I believe they changed landing site. But when they landed, you guys, this is phenomenal. This is supposed to be exciting. This is, one small step for man, it's just, or one small step and then one giant leap for mankind, whatever it was. I'm sorry, I'm kind of spacey right now, but this was supposed to be like a defining moment, man, like a true achievement of mankind. Go look at the footage of these astronauts when they returned for the first press conference, the first news conference, I should say. And a lot of different shows have pointed this out in the past, but I really want people to look at these astronauts' faces. These are not the faces of people who are welcome. They were welcomed home as heroes, not just national heroes, but international heroes, you guys. They were celebrated. There was freaking Tinker Taper parades and, balloons and huge news articles, and they all got their names all became household names. I mean, this was a big deal, you guys. But look at their faces. They look deeply disturbed. They look as if they just saw something that scared them white. I mean, like, the blood drained from their faces. Some of them almost look like they're going to be physically ill. They look so disturbed during these press conferences. And a lot of people believe it's because NASA was telling them, don't you dare talk about this. You're not allowed to say anything about this. And they knew what the implications would be for all of mankind if this information were to get out. But they had to keep quiet, which is why a lot of astronauts, you guys, don't come out. Military people, astronauts, pilots, everyone goes, well, why aren't they telling us until they're about to be dead? Because if a few men in black showed up to your door, you guys, and said, don't talk about this, or I'm going to kill your mom, I'm going to kill your wife, I'm going to kill anyone who ever met you, people you called accidentally, I'm going to kill. I'm going to wipe you off the map systematically. Or I'm going to erase you from existing like they tried to do to Bob Lazar. I mean, the guy can't even get his birth certificate. He has no social security number that's valid because they say he didn't have the right one. People are quick to say like, oh, well, why are they waiting? I mean, they were in fear, you guys. These people were in fear for their safety. They were in fear for their lives. And that's why a lot of them don't talk until they're in their 80s or 70s or whatever. But there are astronauts who have come forward and said, look, man, there are things we are seeing out there that are not ours, and they're advanced, and they are intelligently being controlled. And this doesn't seem to raise any red flags with anyone on the moon, much less here at home. I mean, we have the same things happening here, and nobody really raises an eyebrow or bats an eye about it, and I don't understand why. But going back to the moon, you guys, there's a long belief that the moon is possibly some kind of a base or has bases on it. I'm not saying it's the Death Star or anything like that. I'm just saying it's entirely possible that it is artificial. If you ask scientists today, you guys, one of the best geological elements you could have that you could cover the surface of a planet with to absorb impacts from meteor strikes and asteroids, the elements that give you are the ones that the moon is currently made of. It's the material the moon is made of is phenomenal at absorbing impact. I find that odd that it's just a coincidence that happens to be the way it is. I mean, I think it's odd. A lot of there's too many things that are just odd about this, and nobody asks any questions about why or how. They just go, oh, this is the party line. Okay, yeah, I'm good. And they drink the Kool-Aid. Another thing about NASA, you guys, is NASA is shady. I'm not saying they're not. And I'm not saying it's not possible they faked the moon landings. I don't know. But let's be honest, NASA needs to get their act together, and they all need to be fired and rehired with honest, trustworthy people, and the whole organization needs to be redone. NASA's been busted, a lot of people don't realize this, multiple times for photo editing. They've left behind telltale signs that these photos have been edited, be it razor marks or by increasing the contrast of pictures. You can see things that were supposedly hidden by darkening the backgrounds. Lots of different ways, but they've been busted on this, you guys, so many times it's ridiculous. And here's my question to you. If they're being so above board as they claim and as the government claims, and they're not hiding anything, why would you need to doctor photos of the surface of the moon? Why would you need to doctor any photos? But why would you need to doctor photos of the surface of the moon? There's only one reason you do that. You don't want the public to see something that's there. Well, why wouldn't you want us to see something that's there? That only leaves two options. It's something we put there, or it's something someone else put there. And if it's someone else put there, it's not human. Okay, and I don't believe it's us. I'm not saying I don't believe we currently don't have a base on the moon or near the moon. As far as starships go and things like that, we'll get into that at another date. Actually, I'll get into it a little bit, I guess, here in a second. To get into that, we're going to need to talk about, I believe his name is Gary McKinnon. Um, Hacker, loosely hacker. He didn't really hack. He was just trying software that basically runs for empty. It checks for empty passcodes or passwords that are password, and he got into some files through the Pentagon and NASA, and he claims he found a list that stated names of non-terrestrial officers. Guys, think about that wording. Okay, non-terrestrial officers. And then it gave names of multiple ships that McKinnon says he checked and weren't part of any of the ships assigned to any of our fleet in the Navy. He couldn't find any ships in any of our branches of the military that matched the names of these ships. And it got people started thinking that maybe these ships were starships. Which, I mean, if we were able to crack alien technology from Roswell or any other crashed, retrieved UFO, I mean, it's entirely possible, you guys, that we could have an actual starship that the general public doesn't know about. And people go, well, how would you fund something like that and not know? You guys, we get lied to so often about the funding for things in government. I mean, it's not for the line from Independence Day. You know, you don't honestly believe they do $30,000 for a hammer, $20,000 for a toilet seat. You know, our government is very corrupt on where we spend our money. There's so much money funneled into black budget projects and other kinds of projects that are off the books. They have no congressional oversight whatsoever. So we don't really know what's out there. But my point being to all this is NASA's been caught lying, okay? There's been edited photos of the moon that were just blatantly cut out and blackened in. Like I said, there's been photos of things in the air that we've been able to actually recover partial images of because we brightened the contrast to a high enough degree where it brought out images of things in the background. All kinds of stuff like that. And like I said, if they're not hiding anything, why the need to doctor photos? They've already been busted doctoring photos. And you can't hide under the guise of national security when you're not hiding anything from us but the moon, according to you. It's just the surface of the moon because NASA themselves have said there was nothing behind these blacked out sections on the shots of the moon. But if there was nothing there, then why was the need to cover it up? These are the thoughts I have, you guys. I like to think about things like this. I like to get into it. Once again, you know, the problems I have with NASA faking the moon landing, you guys, is just it's a few things. I'm not going to get into right now. I'm totally open. Like I said, I've watched many of documentary on faking the moon landing, and I believe there are some good points made that it could have been done. But that's not to say that I believe it was done. And as far as the moon guy goes, you guys, I honestly believe we're being watched. These ships are not just coming out from our oceans, which I mean, there are quite a few that come out of our oceans, but they're dropping out of orbit into our airspace. And a lot of people believe they're coming from the moon or another such base. And think about this. A lot of scientists will tell you, as far as alien life goes, that if they're so far away, even at the fastest that we could think of, beyond light fast, it would take so long to get here. Not if the civilization was moving around in a gigantic ship. You know, one say the size 1/4 of our planet. Wouldn't take a whole lot to put a whole civilization on something that large and move it where you wanted to go. These are just some deep thoughts for you guys to have. I'm going to do some more videos here relatively soon, everyone. I really hope that you enjoyed what I had to talk about tonight. And if you did, please leave comments. Let me know if there's anything else you guys would like to hear me talk about. Any specific conspiracy theories, you guys, any alien crash sites, sightings, UFO sightings. Just anything in general that my channel covers. If there's ever anything that I talk about that you want to know more about, maybe I'll do an upcoming video on it. Just let me know, drop me a line. I read the comments, and I appreciate once again all of you for joining me here with Straight Jacket White Rabbit. As always, as your host, Adam, I am honored to have each and every one of you. And if you're new to my channel and you liked what you saw or you liked what you heard, do me a favor, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Hit the bell. Make sure you guys are getting the notifications for when I post new content. And I'll see you next time.